He was a king in the boardroom, a titan of industry who saw people as assets and life as a series of transactions. On the day he was set to finalize the transaction of his marriage, Damian Sterling believed he was closing a chapter of inconvenient emotion to focus on his billion-dollar empire. He was calm, he was certain, he was in control. But control is an illusion, and his was about to be shattered not by a market crash, but by the sight of the woman he was discarding and the 3 tiny heartbeats in a stroller she pushed before her. This isn't just a story of divorce. It's a story of ruin, rebirth, and a revelation that would bring a millionaire to his knees. The air in the hallway of the Maricopa County Superior Courthouse was stale, thick with the scent of old paper and quiet desperation. For Damian Sterling, it was just another Tuesday, an inconvenient, time-consuming Tuesday that stood between him and a $700 million merger with a Japanese tech firm. He checked his Patek Philippe watch, 9:15 a.m. His lawyer, a portly man named Robert Davies, was droning on about final stipulations. She gets the house in Scottsdale, the G-Wagon, and the agreed-upon alimony for 5 years. In return, she signs the NDA and relinquishes any and all future claims to Sterling Innovations or any subsidiary assets. It's clean, Damian, a clean break. Damian nodded, his gaze fixed on the double doors at the end of the hall. His jaw was a hard line of granite. Is she here yet, Robert? I have a call with Tokyo at 11. She should be. Her lawyer, Ms. Albright, confirmed. Damian adjusted the knot on his Tom Ford tie. He felt nothing. Or rather, he had convinced himself he felt nothing. Lara Vance, soon to be Lara Vance again, not Sterling, was a chapter he was closing. She was beautiful, kind, and intelligent, the perfect wife for a man of his stature. But she was soft. She talked about feelings, about us time, about wanting a family, distractions. His legacy wasn't going to be children. It was going to be Sterling Innovations, a titan of next-gen biotech and AI logistics that would reshape the world. He had told her as much during their last explosive argument 6 months ago. She had come to him, her eyes wide with something he couldn't decipher, her hands trembling. Damian, we need to talk. There's something important. He had waved her off, his phone pressed to his ear. Not now, Lara. I'm closing the Biogen deal. But this can't wait. It's about us, our future. Our future, he'd said, finally looking at her with cold irritation, is this company. Everything else is secondary. We'll talk when I have time. He never made time. A week later, he came home to a silent, empty penthouse. Half her clothes were gone. On his pillow, a simple handwritten note. You were right. The company is your future. I need to go find mine. Below it, her wedding ring. He had been angry at first. The audacity. But anger quickly gave way to a cold, calculated relief. It was for the best. No more emotional clutter. He filed for divorce the next day. The double doors at the end of the hall swung open. A woman from her lawyer's office walked through, then held the door. And then Damian's world, the carefully constructed, sterile, and predictable world he had built, tilted on its axis. It was Lara, but it wasn't the Lara he remembered. The defeated, heartbroken woman from their last fight was gone. This Lara stood taller, despite the visible exhaustion under her eyes. There was a fierce, protective strength in her posture he'd never seen before. Her simple floral dress couldn't hide the changes in her body, the subtle fullness that remained. But that wasn't what stole the air from Damian's lungs. It was what she was pushing. A stroller? Not a single, but a wide, state-of-the-art triple stroller. In it, nestled in soft blankets, were 3 tiny sleeping infants. Damian's brain short-circuited. He literally took a step back, bumping into the wall. The sound of his own blood rushed in his ears, drowning out Robert's voice. Triplets? It wasn't possible. He stared, his mind racing, trying to compute the data. The timing. 6 months since she left. A full-term pregnancy. He felt a cold dread, a terrifying primal panic that no fluctuating stock price had ever induced. He strode forward, his long legs eating up the distance in the hallway until he was standing in front of her, a monolith of shock and disbelief. Lara, his voice was a harsh whisper. What is this? Ilara looked up at him, her hazel eyes not with the love he once knew, nor the pain he had last seen, but with a cool, impenetrable calm. It was the look one gives a stranger. This, she said, her voice even and clear, gesturing to the stroller, is my future, the one I went to find. Damien's gaze dropped back to the babies. One was stirring, a tiny fist batting at the air. They had his dark hair, all three of them. He could see it, even in the dim courthouse light. A boy, another boy, and a girl. He felt a dizzying vertigo. Are they... He couldn't finish the sentence. The question was a bomb he was terrified to detonate. Are they yours, Damien? Ilara finished for him, her voice laced with a bitter irony. You're a man who prides himself on data. Do the math. I left 6 months ago. These are my children. The unspoken words hung between them. They are your children too. The memory of that final conversation slammed into him. There's something important. This was it. This was what she had tried to tell him. He had been on the verge of becoming a father to 3 children, and he had dismissed it for a conference call. Panic, raw and unadulterated, seized him. His empire, his merger, his carefully planned life, it all evaporated. In its place was the terrifying, life-altering reality of 3 infants he never knew existed. Why didn't you tell me, he demanded, his voice rising. You hid this from me? You hid my children from me? Ilara's calm finally cracked, a flash of fire in her eyes. Hid them? I tried to tell you, Damien. I stood in front of you, begging for 5 minutes of your time, and you waved me away like I was an inconvenience. You told me the company was the only future that mattered, so I left to protect the only future that mattered to me. His lawyer, Robert, was now beside him, his face a mask of professional shock. Ms. Vance, this is a significant development. We need to postpone. We need to establish paternity. Do what you must, Ilara said, her attention already back on the stirring baby. She gently placed a pacifier in its mouth, her movements practiced and sure. Damien felt a surge of possessive rage. They are Sterlings. They will have the Sterling name. They will have everything. Ilara looked at him, and for the first time, he saw not anger, but pity. They don't need the Sterling name, Damien. They need a father, and you've made it abundantly clear you have no time for that role. He was about to retort, to use his power, his money to threaten and command his way back into control, when the courthouse doors opened again. A man walked in. He was tall, with kind eyes and a warm, easy smile. He wore a simple blazer and jeans, but he carried an air of quiet confidence. Damien knew him instantly. Julian Croft, his old rival from business school, now the CEO of a successful sustainable tech company, Croft Innovations. The man whose ethics and people-first approach Damien had always mocked as weak. Julian didn't even glance at Damien. His eyes went straight to Ilara, and his smile softened. Lara, sorry I'm late, Julian said, his voice a gentle murmur. The traffic was a mess. How are the little warriors? He leaned over the stroller, his familiarity with the babies a physical blow to Damien. He adjusted a blanket on one, his fingers brushing the baby's cheek with an intimacy that made Damien's blood run cold. Liam's getting fussy, Ilara said, a hint of a smile touching her lips for the first time. It was a smile Damien hadn't seen in years, and it wasn't for him. He needs his bottle. Noah and Chloe are still out for the count. Julian chuckled. Of course, Liam's the demanding one, just like his... He stopped, catching himself, and finally looked at Damien. There was no animosity in his eyes, just a cool, level assessment. Sterling. Damien stood frozen, the world's most powerful CEO rendered utterly impotent. His rival, the man he'd considered a lesser player in the great game of business, was here. Not as a lawyer, not as a stranger, but as someone who knew his children's names. Someone who knew which one was fussy. Someone who Ilara looked at with warmth and trust. Panic morphed into a new, terrifying emotion. Dread mixed with a venomous, all-consuming jealousy. He wasn't just losing his wife. He had already lost her. He was watching another man step into the life that should have been his. A life he hadn't even known existed until 10 minutes ago. The divorce was no longer a clean transaction. It was the beginning of his utter ruin. The ride back to his penthouse atop the Sterling Tower was a blur of muted city sounds and the frantic cacophony inside his own head. Damien sat in the back of his chauffeured Maybach, the supple leather feeling like sandpaper against his skin. He had stormed out of the courthouse, leaving Robert Davies to stammer through a postponement request. He couldn't breathe in that hallway, couldn't stand to see Julian Croft place a comforting hand on Alara's arm as he helped her navigate the stroller towards the elevators. He was a man who solved problems. He acquired companies, crushed competitors, bent markets to his will. This was a problem of a different magnitude. The elevator opened directly into his home. The penthouse was a monument to his success. 40-foot floor-to-ceiling windows offering a godlike view of the city, minimalist Italian furniture, a curated collection of modern art. It was cold, silent, and for the first time, crushingly empty. He walked past the 10-person dining table where he'd hosted dignitaries and investors, a place Alara had once tried to fill with flowers. He told her they were impractical. He strode into the master bedroom, a vast expanse of gray and chrome. He stood before the floor-to-ceiling mirror and saw not the titan of industry, but a hollowed-out man whose world had been upended. Liam, Noah, Chloe. The names echoed in the cavernous silence. His children. He had sons, a daughter. The thought was so alien, so overwhelming it was physically painful. He had built an empire of steel and silicon, but he had no idea how to be a father. His CEO instincts kicked in, a desperate attempt to regain control. He pulled out his phone, his fingers flying across the screen. First, he called Robert Davies. "I want a paternity test. Expedited. The best lab in the country. Money is no object," he commanded, his voice tight. "And I want you to start drawing up custody papers. Full custody. I have the resources. She's living, God knows where, with him." "Damien, we need to be careful," Robert warned. "A judge will see this as reactionary. She's their mother. She's been their sole caregiver. We can't just—" "Make it happen, Robert," Damien snarled, hanging up. He was already dialing his head of security. "I want a full background check on Julian Croft. Everything. Business, personal, financial, where he lives, who he sees. I want to know what he had for breakfast. And I want to know where Alara is living, now." He paced the length of the penthouse, the city lights twinkling below him, like a galaxy he owned, but could no longer appreciate. He was trying to treat this like a hostile takeover. Gather intel, identify weaknesses, leverage resources, and win. But the image of Julian Croft's gentle hand on the stroller kept flashing in his mind. The easy way he said their names, the shared look with Alara. That wasn't a business transaction. That was life. A life that was happening without him, a life that was centered around three tiny beings who were half him. He ended up in what was once Alara's art studio. He'd begrudgingly given her a spare room with good light. He'd considered it a frivolous hobby. Now he opened the door for the first time in months. Her easel was still there, but it was covered with a white sheet. On a side table, however, were a few charcoal sketches she'd left behind. They weren't landscapes or abstracts. They were sketches of baby clothes, a tiny pair of booties, a small, soft-looking onesie, and on one page 3 interconnected circles with the names Liam, Noah, and Chloe written in her elegant script. He sank into a chair, the sketch trembling in his hand. The proof was right here. She had been dreaming of them, planning for them, while he was dreaming of stock prices and market caps. His phone buzzed. It was his assistant, Evelyn Reed, a woman in her 50s, sharp as a tack, who had been with him for 10 years and was the only person who dared to speak to him with unvarnished truth. "The board is asking for an update on the Tokyo merger," she said, her voice crisp. "Your 11 a.m. call is in 30 minutes. Damien stared at the sketch. The merger felt like a distant, insignificant game. "Cancel it," he said, his voice hoarse. There was a pause on the other end. "Cancel it. Damien, this is the final negotiation. They won't reschedule. Then the deal is dead, Evelyn. I don't care." The silence that followed was profound. Evelyn, who had seen him work through pneumonia and pull all-nighters for deals a fraction of this size, knew something was fundamentally broken. "Damien," she said, her tone softening from assistant to something more human. What happened at the courthouse? He couldn't say it. He couldn't admit the totality of his failure. It was complicated. I see, she said, though her tone implied she saw much more. There's something else, a series of rejected payments from your personal account over the last few months. Large ones, to a high-risk obstetrics clinic, a neonatal specialist, and several baby supply stores. They were all flagged by the bank. I was going to ask you about them. Damien's blood ran cold. What are you talking about? Ilara must have still been on the joint account when she made the initial appointments. The payments were declined because they were unusual. I have the list right here. Dr. Isabel Rivas, St. Jude's Neonatal Care. He had been so disconnected, so immersed in his own world, that he hadn't even noticed. The evidence of his impending fatherhood had been sitting in his bank's fraud detection folder, and he'd been too busy, too important to look. He had not only ignored his wife, he had financially, albeit unintentionally, abandoned her during the most critical time. The thought of Ilara, pregnant with triplets, having her card decline while trying to pay for their care, it was a new level of shame. He ended the call, the phone slipping from his grasp. He looked out the window again. The city was still there. His name was still on the tower, but he had never felt so poor, so utterly bankrupt. He had all the money in the world, but he had missed everything that mattered. And worse, someone else had been there to pick up the pieces. Someone he despised. The panic was fading, replaced by a deep, terrifying ache. It was the feeling of having lost a war he never even knew he was fighting. While Damien Sterling was spiraling in his gilded cage, Ilara Vance was in her own version of a penthouse. A modest, third-floor walk-up apartment in a quiet, tree-lined neighborhood in a less fashionable part of town. The penthouse was the top floor, and its wealth wasn't in the view, but in the life it contained. The small living room was a chaotic symphony of parenthood. A playmat covered most of the floor, dotted with soft toys. A bottle warmer hummed on the kitchen counter next to a towering stack of sterilized bottles. The air smelled of baby powder and milk. This was Ilara's empire, and she was its exhausted but devoted queen. Her sister Clara was there, expertly burping Noah while Chloe slept soundly in her bouncer. I still can't believe he just showed up, Clara said, her voice sharp with disdain for Damien. The nerve of that man, after everything. What did you do? What could I do? Ilara murmured, gently rocking Liam in her arms. The courthouse had drained her. Seeing Damien had been like touching a live wire. All the old pain, the love, the disappointment had surged through her in one agonizing jolt. Ms. Albright handled the postponement. Julian got me out of there before I fell apart. Thank God for Julian, Clara said, placing the now settled Noah into his bassinet. Seriously, Ilara, the man is a saint. Who else helps a nearly stranger, pregnant with triplets, find an apartment, co-signs the lease because the landlord is a jerk, and then spends his weekends helping assemble cribs? Ilara looked around the small apartment. Julian's kindness was everywhere. The sturdy cribs, the high-end baby monitor he'd insisted on buying, the freezer full of portioned meals his own personal chef had prepared for her for the first month after the babies were born. She had met him by chance. It was 2 months after she'd left Damien. She was hugely pregnant, exhausted and lonely, sitting in a small cafe, trying to figure out how to navigate the welfare system on a laptop. She'd been a CEO's wife. She had no credit history of her own, no recent work experience. Her attempt to use the joint account for the first specialist visit had been declined, a humiliation that had left her in tears. She was trying to sell some of her jewelry, the last vestiges of her old life, to pay for the mounting medical bills. A man at the next table had noticed her distress. "Excuse me," he'd said gently. "You look like you have the weight of the world on your shoulders. I don't mean to pry, but is there anything I can do to help?" It was Julian Croft. She recognized him from a business magazine profile she'd once seen. Damien's rival. Her first instinct was to refuse, a knee-jerk loyalty to the man who had shattered her heart. But his eyes held only genuine concern, not pity or avarice, and she was desperate. Hesitantly, she told him a sanitized version of her story, a marriage that had ended, a surprise high-risk pregnancy, and the struggle to get back on her feet. She never mentioned Damien by name. Julian listened. He didn't offer platitudes. He offered practical solutions. He knew a pro bono financial advisor who specialized in cases like hers. He knew a landlord in a building his company owned a small stake in. He gave her his personal number and told her to call if she needed anything at all. And she did. She needed help carrying groceries up the stairs. She needed a ride to a late-night hospital checkup when a scare sent her into a panic. He was there for the birth, waiting in the hospital lobby for hours, because Clara was stuck in traffic and Alara was terrified of being alone. He was the first person, after the doctors, to see the triplets. He had looked at them with a sense of wonder and awe that she had once dreamed of seeing in Damien's eyes. He never crossed a line. He was a friend, a steady, supportive presence. He never spoke ill of her estranged husband, only focusing on her and the baby's well-being. But in his quiet, consistent support, he highlighted everything Damien was not. "Is he in love with you?" Clara asked, her voice softer now. Alara sighed, her gaze distant. "I don't know. Maybe. Sometimes I think I see it in his eyes. But he knows how broken I am. He knows all I have room for in my heart right now is them." She looked down at the three perfect faces. "We're a package deal. A very loud, very demanding package." "A beautiful package," Julian's voice said from the doorway. He let himself in with a key she had insisted he take for emergencies, his arms full of grocery bags. He smiled, his presence instantly lightening the mood in the room. "And I brought reinforcements." He began unpacking: organic baby formula, diapers, and a bottle of expensive wine for Clara, and a non-alcoholic one for Alara. It was this thoughtfulness, this attention to the small details, that constantly floored her. As he moved around her small kitchen with an easy familiarity, Alara felt a pang of something complex. It was gratitude, deeply and profoundly, but it was tangled with guilt. She was using this good man, leaning on him, and what could she offer in return? Her life was a chaotic mess of feeding schedules and diaper changes. "Julian, you have to stop this," she said quietly, once Clara had left. "It's too much." He stopped and turned to her, his expression serious. "Stop what? Helping a friend? Alara, when I met you, you were trying to sell a beautiful diamond bracelet to pay for a doctor's visit. I'm not a monster, and frankly," he said, a wry smile playing on his lips, "spending time with you and the little warriors is the best part of my week. My board meetings are far less cute." He then looked at her, his smile fading. "He's going to fight you, isn't he? Sterling?" Alara nodded, a fresh wave of weariness washing over her. "His lawyer called mine. They want a paternity test. They're talking about custody." Julian's jaw tightened, the first flicker of genuine anger she'd ever seen from him. Custody? The man who didn't even know they existed? The man who, forgive me for saying this, let you go through a high-risk pregnancy with triplets completely alone? He has no concept of what that entails. He has money, Julian, and power. He can hire the best lawyers. He can paint me as an unfit mother living in a tiny apartment. Julian stepped closer, his voice low and firm. "No, he can't. Because you're the best mother I've ever seen. And this apartment isn't a sign of poverty. It's a fortress of love you built for them. If he wants a fight, he'll get one. And you won't be alone in it." In that moment, looking at his determined face, Alara felt a surge of security she hadn't felt in years. It wasn't the security of money or status that Damien had offered. It was the security of knowing someone truly had her back. It was terrifying because it made her feel something, a spark of hope, a flicker of affection that she had thought was dead forever. And it was terrifying because she knew, deep down, that a part of her heart still foolishly, stubbornly, belonged to the man who had broken it. The father of her children. The results of the expedited DNA test came back in a sealed envelope delivered by a special courier. Damien tore it open with trembling hands. He didn't need to read the jargon. The conclusion at the bottom was stark and absolute. Probability of paternity, 99.999% for Liam Sterling, Noah Sterling, and Chloe Sterling. Seeing their names legally bound to his on an official document made it irrevocably real. The abstract shock hardened into concrete fact. He was a father. His first instinct, the one honed in boardrooms and hostile negotiations, was to deploy his greatest weapon: wealth. He would overwhelm Alara with generosity, demonstrating that only he could provide the life his children deserved. He had his real estate agent purchase the magnificent six-bedroom estate next door to his own, the one with sprawling lawns and a state-of-the-art security system. He had a team of designers work around the clock to create three of the most opulent, custom-designed nurseries imaginable. He ordered trust funds to be set up, each with a seven-figure seat amount. He sent a fleet of black cars to her apartment building, laden with gifts, designer baby clothes from Paris, the most expensive German-engineered stroller on the market, a mountain of toys that would fill a preschool. The response came not as a phone call, but as a single, devastatingly simple act. The next day, every single item was returned to the lobby of the Sterling Tower. The designer clothes, the toys, the stroller, all of it. Attached to one of the boxes was a simple white envelope. Inside, a note in Alara's handwriting. "Damien, my children need a father, not a financier. They have everything they need right now: warmth, food, and my undivided attention. These things you've sent are for you, not for them. They are monuments to your guilt. Do not send anything else." The public rejection was a humiliating blow. His staff in the lobby witnessed the return, their whispered conversations ceasing whenever he walked past. The note burned in his hand. Monuments to your guilt. She saw right through him. He wasn't trying to be a father. He was trying to acquire his children, to win them like a trophy. That same afternoon, the report on Julian Croft landed on his desk. It was thorough. Julian was clean. No scandals, no debt, excellent business reputation. The report detailed his frequent visits to Alara's apartment, his car parked outside overnight on several occasions, which the private investigator noted was likely due to late-night baby emergencies, as he always left at dawn, and his purchases of diapers and formula. The final page was a grainy photo of Julian in a park, laughing as he pushed the triple stroller, with Alara walking beside him, a genuine smile on her face. Damien slammed the report down on his desk, the photo staring up at him like an accusation. This was his rival strategy, not overwhelming force, but quiet consistency, presence, support. Things Damien couldn't buy. His world was unraveling. The Tokyo merger had officially collapsed, the news of which sent a tremor through Sterling Innovation's stock price. He was distracted, volatile, and his executive team was walking on eggshells around him. He snapped at Evelyn during a meeting, a rare loss of composure that shocked the entire room into silence. Later, she came into his office and closed the door. She placed a cup of tea on his desk. "This isn't working, Damien," she said, her voice devoid of judgment, only fact. "What isn't working?" he bit back, staring at the stock ticker on his screen. "This, trying to wage a war for your family like you're taking over a competitor. You're going to lose." "I don't lose," he said through gritted teeth. "You already have," Evelyn said quietly. The truth of her words hit him like a physical blow. "You lost Alara months ago, and you can't buy back your children. You think money is your greatest asset? For this battle, it's your greatest liability. It's a shield you're using to hide from the fact that you are terrified and you have no idea what to do." He finally looked away from the screen, his bravado crumbling. He looked at this woman who had organized his life for a decade, who had seen him at his best and his worst. "She won't see me," he whispered, the admission costing him everything. "She won't take my calls. She looks at me like I'm a monster." "Did you ever think," Evelyn said gently, "to just say sorry? Not 'I'm sorry, here's a mansion.' Just, 'I'm sorry, I messed up. I was a fool.' No clauses, no conditions. Just the truth." The concept was as foreign to him as changing a diaper. In his world, apologies were admissions of weakness. You never gave ground. But Evelyn was right. His strategy, the only one he knew, was a catastrophic failure. He was at rock bottom, sitting in a penthouse worth tens of millions, feeling utterly worthless. He looked at the picture of Alara, Julian, and his children in the park. The easy domestic bliss of it was a knife in his gut. Julian wasn't just his rival in business anymore. He was his rival in life, and he was winning. The epiphany struck him then, a painful, blinding flash of clarity. He couldn't win this by being Damian Sterling, CEO. That man had already lost. To have any chance at all, he had to become someone else entirely. He had to become a father. And that wasn't a title you could purchase. It was one you had to earn. He picked up a pen and a simple sheet of paper from his desk, pushing aside the multi-million-dollar contracts. He thought for a long time. Then he began to write. It wasn't a legal document or a business proposal. It was a letter, and it started with the two hardest words he had ever written. I'm sorry. The letter arrived by a simple postal service, a stark contrast to the fleet of couriers Damien usually employed. Ilara stared at the envelope, her name and address written in Damien's sharp, decisive handwriting. She almost threw it away, but a flicker of morbid curiosity made her open it. The letter was short, stripped of his usual corporate jargon and arrogance. Ilara, I am sorry. Those are the only words that matter, and I have no right to ask you to believe them. I was a fool. I was arrogant, and I was blind. I threw away the most important thing in my life because I couldn't see past my own ambition. I am not writing to make excuses. There are none. I am not writing to ask for your forgiveness, as I haven't earned it. I am writing to ask for something else, a chance. Not for me and you, but for them. May I please see my children? Not to claim them, not to shower them with things, but just to see them, to learn their faces. I will meet you anywhere, anytime, under any conditions you set. Whatever you decide, I will respect it. Damien. She read it 3 times. It was the most honest thing he had ever written to her. The raw vulnerability in it unsettled her. She showed it to Julian that evening. He read it, his expression unreadable. What do you think? She asked, her voice trembling slightly. Julian was silent for a long moment, staring at the letter. I think, he said slowly, that he sounds like a man who has finally hit the bottom. And I think that Liam, Noah, and Chloe deserve the chance to know their father, provided he is a safe and positive influence in their lives. The decision is yours, Ilara, but if you say yes, you won't be alone. His support, his lack of jealousy, was both a comfort and a pang of guilt. He was actively encouraging her to reconnect with the man who was his rival in every sense of the word, all for the sake of the children. And so, a week later, Damian Sterling found himself standing awkwardly in the middle of a public park, feeling more nervous than he had before the initial public offering of his company. He had worn a simple polo shirt and trousers, an outfit Evelyn had to help him pick out, warning him against showing up in a suit. He held a small, simple bag with 3 soft, plush teddy bears. No stock certificates, no trust fund documents, just bears. He saw her then, walking towards him. She was pushing the stroller, and Julian was walking beside her. A knot of jealousy tightened in Damien's stomach, but he forced it down. This was his new reality. He had to accept it. Damien, Ilara said, her tone neutral. She stopped a few feet away from him, a protective barrier. Julian gave him a curt nod and then took a few steps back, giving them space but remaining a watchful presence. Ilara, thank you for coming, Damien said, his voice rough. His eyes immediately went to the stroller. They were awake, 3 pairs of wide, curious eyes staring up at the sky. His children. They were impossibly small, impossibly perfect. You wanted to see them, she said. He knelt, his expensive trousers creasing in the grass. He was now at their level, his heart hammered against his ribs. He didn't know what to do. He reached into his bag and pulled out one of the bears, holding it out tentatively. Hi, he whispered, feeling like an idiot. I'm Damien. Liam, whom Ilara pointed out, just stared. Chloe gurgled. But Noah, the fussy one, took one look at this strange, large man, and his face crumpled. A piercing wail filled the quiet park air. Damien recoiled as if he'd been burned. Panic set in. He had made his own son cry within 10 seconds of meeting him. Ilara swooped in instantly, picking Noah up, rocking him, murmuring soothing words until his cries subsided. She handled him with an ease and grace that highlighted his own staggering incompetence. The rest of the hour was a painful exercise in inadequacy. He learned their full names: Liam James, Noah David, Chloe Grace. He watched as Ilara fed Chloe a bottle, as Julian expertly changed Liam's diaper on a portable mat when Alara had her hands full with the other two. Damien just stood there, a useless, hulking figure. He felt like an outsider looking through a window at a family that had already been formed without him. But he didn't run. He stayed. He asked questions. What time do they wake up? What's that rash on Chloe's neck? Does Noah always cry this much? They were clumsy, basic questions, but they were genuine. Ilara answered them tersely at first, but gradually, seeing his sincere effort, her tone softened almost imperceptibly. This became the new routine. Twice a week, in the park. Damien read parenting books at night, devouring them like business reports. He learned about colic, sleep regression, and teething. The next time he came, he brought a teething toy, which Chloe happily gummed. It was a small victory, but it felt bigger than closing a multi-million-dollar deal. He learned to tell them apart not just by their bracelets, but by their personalities. Liam was the calm observer. Chloe was endlessly curious, her eyes following everything. Noah was sensitive and attached to his mother. He never overstepped. He never brought up their past, never mentioned custody, never offered money. He just showed up, on time every time. One day it started to rain unexpectedly. They huddled under a large oak tree. Julian, who had been about to leave for a meeting, immediately took off his blazer and held it over the stroller to shield the babies. Damien, without thinking, took off his own expensive jacket and draped it over Alara's shoulders. She flinched at his touch, but she didn't shrug it off. They stood there for a moment, the five of them, a strange, broken, and patched-together family, waiting for the storm to pass. The turning point in his rivalry with Julian came a few weeks later. Damien arrived at the park to find only Julian there, sitting on a bench, the empty stroller beside him. "They're running late," Julian said. "Alara had a tough night with them. All three are teething." Damien sat on the other end of the bench. The silence was thick with unspoken history. "Croft," Damien began, "I know what this looks like. I appreciate what you've done for them." The words felt like swallowing glass. Julian turned to him, his expression serious. "I didn't do it for you, Sterling. I did it for her and for them, because it was the right thing to do. And because," he paused, his gaze direct, "I came to care for her very much." It was an admission of love, and it was a warning. "I have an opportunity," Julian continued, surprising Damien. "My company is launching a major initiative in Southeast Asia, a sustainable energy project. It's a 2-year post based in Singapore. I was offered it months ago. I turned it down." "Why are you telling me this?" Damien asked. "Because I'm considering taking it now," Julian said. "I see you. You're trying. You're clumsy and you have a long way to go, but you're not the man you were 6 months ago." "Alara," she's confused. "She's grateful to me, but her heart is still tied up with you. You're the father of her children. It's a bond I can't compete with." He stood up, his gaze unwavering. "I'm not going to be the guy who waits around, hoping a family falls apart. That's not who I am. Those kids need their father. Don't you dare prove me wrong for stepping aside. Don't you dare break her heart again." Julian Croft, his greatest rival, was not just conceding the field. He was challenging Damien to be a better man. He was gracefully exiting, leaving a vacuum that only Damien could fill. The weight of that responsibility, of that unexpected trust, was heavier than his entire empire. Julian's departure for Singapore left a noticeable void. The park meetings felt different, emptier. The buffer was gone. It was just Damien and Alara, two people orbiting the bright, demanding suns of their 3 children. The tension between them was palpable, a fragile truce held together by diapers and feeding schedules. Damien continued to be patient, to learn, to simply be present. He was playing the long game, not for a company, but for a life. The real test came on a Tuesday night, close to midnight. Damien was in his office, the last one in the tower as usual, but instead of analyzing market trends, he was staring at a photo on his phone, a picture Ilara had hesitantly sent him that afternoon of Chloe taking her first wobbly steps. A small smile touched his lips. His private line, the one only a handful of people had, rang shrilly, shattering the silence. The caller ID flashed a name he never expected to see at this hour. Ilara. His heart leaped into his throat. He answered instantly. Ilara, what's wrong? Damien. Her voice was tight with panic, a sound that sliced through him. It's Liam. He's burning up. The digital thermometer says 104. He's so limp and he's having trouble breathing. I don't know what to do. The pediatrician's line is busy. Where are you? Damien demanded, already shrugging on his jacket and grabbing his keys. I'm at home. I was about to call an ambulance. Don't. I'll be there in 10 minutes. I'm faster, he said, his voice taking on a command tone he hadn't used with her in months. But this time it was born of focus, not arrogance. Get him ready. Get the other two ready. We're going to the emergency room at Phoenix Children's Hospital. It's the best. Go. He didn't wait for a reply. He sprinted through the empty office, his mind a steel trap of efficiency. He called the hospital's chief administrator, a man he knew from a charity board, on his way to the elevator. Dr. Matthews, it's Damien Sterling. I'm on my way to your ER with my infant son. High fever, respiratory distress. His name is Liam Sterling. I need your best pediatric team on standby. There was no hesitation, no question of pulling strings. This was a father's prerogative. He broke every speed limit, his Maybach eating up the miles of deserted streets. When he screeched to a halt in front of her apartment building, she was already there, a frantic silhouette under a streetlight, juggling a diaper bag and holding a worryingly still Liam, while Noah and Chloe were strapped in their car seats inside the stroller. Damien was out of the car in a flash. He didn't see a woman who had left him. He saw the terrified mother of his child. He gently took Liam from her. The heat radiating from the tiny body was terrifying. Get in the back with them, he commanded gently. He expertly collapsed the stroller and put it in the trunk, a skill he'd practiced in his garage, before getting them all safely into the car and racing towards the hospital. The hours that followed were a blur of sterile white walls, the beeping of machines, and hushed conversations with doctors. Liam had a severe case of RSV, a respiratory virus that can be dangerous for infants. They admitted him immediately. Damien took over. While Ilara stayed glued to Liam's side, he handled everything else. He arranged for a private room. He had food and coffee brought for Ilara. He calmly rocked a crying Noah in one arm, while using his phone with the other hand to cancel his entire schedule for the week, pushing back a meeting with his board of directors with a simple, non-negotiable text. Family emergency. I am unavailable until further notice. Sometime around 4 a.m., with Liam's fever finally starting to break thanks to the medication, Damien found Ilara slumped in a chair, her face pale with exhaustion, staring at their son in the hospital crib. Noah and Chloe were asleep in portable bassinets the nurses had provided. He knelt in front of her, taking her cold hands in his. He's going to be okay, Ilara. They said he's responding well. She looked at him, her eyes shimmering with unshed tears. All the walls she had so carefully constructed between them had been demolished by the night's terror. I was so scared, she whispered, and the first person I thought to call was you. I'm glad you did, he said, his voice thick with emotion. I'm his father. This is where I am supposed to be. They sat in silence for a long time, their hands clasped together, watching their children breathe. The beeping of the heart monitor was the only sound. In the harsh fluorescent light of that hospital room, stripped of wealth, status, and rivalry, they were just two parents, bound by a shared love and a shared fear. You've changed, she said quietly, her gaze searching his face. I had to, he answered, his thumb stroking the back of her hand. I was living in a black and white world, obsessed with building a legacy out of concrete and code. I didn't realize the real legacy was the one I almost threw away. You, Liam, Noah, Chloe, you're the color. You're everything. A single tear rolled down her cheek. It wasn't a tear of sadness or anger, but of a slow, cautious thaw. A few days later, when Liam was discharged, Damien drove them all home. Not to her small apartment, but to the large empty house he had bought months ago. He had fired the designers and had instead, with Evelyn's help, furnished it to be a comfortable, safe, and practical family home, not a showroom. He helped her carry the sleeping children inside. In the foyer on a small table was a framed photo. It was the grainy picture his PI had taken, the one of her, Julian, and the babies in the park. She looked at it, confused. "I kept it to remind myself," he said softly, "of what a family looks like, and what I had to become to deserve one." He then reached into his jacket and pulled out a worn, slightly crumpled document. It was the divorce agreement they were meant to sign months ago. He held it out to her. She took it, her heart pounding. This was it, the final transaction. But instead of a pen, he held out a lighter. "I don't want to close a chapter, Alara," he said, his eyes pleading. "I want to start a new book. With you. With them. If you'll let me." Looking from the cold legal document to the warm, sleeping face of her son in his arms, Alara knew the answer. She took the lighter. Together they walked to the fireplace and watched the papers that were meant to tear them apart curl into ash, their old life turning into dust to make way for the new. In the end, Damien Sterling's greatest merger had nothing to do with business. It was the fusion of his broken past with a future he never knew he wanted. He learned that true wealth isn't counted in stock prices or assets, but in sleepy midnight feedings, clumsy first steps, and the unconditional love of a family. His journey from a cold-hearted CEO to a devoted father wasn't about a grand gesture, but about the 1,000 small, consistent acts of showing up. It's a powerful reminder that it's never too late to change, to tear up the old script and write a new story. What would you have done in Alara's shoes? Could you forgive a man like Damien? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. If this story of redemption and second chances moved you, please give this video a thumbs up, share it with someone who loves a dramatic tale, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more stories that explore the depths of the human heart.